2021, art conservators made a discovery while restoring one of the world's most famous paintings. Hidden in the top left corner, written in tiny pencil strokes barely visible to the naked eye, were 8 words in Danish. "Kon kun være malet af en gal mand," meaning could only have been painted by a madman. For over a century, experts believed this was vandalism, someone mocking the artist. But infrared scans revealed the truth that Edvard Munch had written it himself. A man terrified of insanity his entire life had finally admitted it on his own painting. But why? The answer lies in what happened the day he created The Scream. Edvard Munch was born into a family cursed by death and madness. When he was 5, his mother died of tuberculosis. 9 years later, his beloved sister Sophie, also from tuberculosis. His father, a fundamentalist, spiraled into depression. He told young Edvard that these deaths were divine punishment for their sins. His sister Laura developed schizophrenia and was institutionalized. His only brother would later die of pneumonia. Munch himself was a sickly child, confined to bed for months at a time. He drew to keep himself occupied. His father gave him no support when he decided to become an artist. He considered the profession unholy. By the time Munch reached adulthood, he'd watched nearly everyone he loved either die or lose their minds, and he lived in constant fear that he would be next. This fear wasn't irrational. In 1908, 15 years after painting The Scream, Munch would suffer a complete nervous breakdown. But in 1892, something happened that would haunt him forever. January 22nd, 1892, Munch wrote in his diary, "I was walking down the road with 2 friends when the sun set. Suddenly the sky turned as red as blood. My friends walked on. I stood there quaking with angst, and I felt as though a vast, endless scream passed through nature." For years, people interpreted this literally: a beautiful sunset, an anxiety attack, a moment of existential dread. But the location of this walk tells a different story. The setting is Ekeberg, a hill overlooking the Oslo fjord. Munch wasn't there for the scenery. He was there to visit his sister Laura. She had just been confined to an asylum near this exact spot. His father had died recently. After a lifetime of abandonment through death and disease, Munch was now walking away from his beloved sister, leaving her behind in that institution. Her screams of terror must have echoed in his mind as he walked down that road. The scream through nature wasn't metaphorical, it was her scream, his sister's scream, and he couldn't block it out. Now look at the painting again. The figure isn't screaming, it's covering its ears, trying desperately to block out the scream. Munch confirmed this himself on an earlier lithograph. "I felt a huge scream through nature. Nature is screaming, the figure is suffering." The composition is deceptively simple. The painting divides into 3 zones: the bridge, the fjords, and the sky. The bridge, sharp diagonal lines, anchors us in reality. This is the physical world Munch is standing in, but the background dissolves into chaos. Swirling, bleeding colors, the world is unraveling. The 2 figures in the background, his friends from the diary entry, are walking away, deep in conversation, completely oblivious to his suffering. Munch placed them at a physical distance to underline the emotional distance. They're on a straight road, moving away, abandoning him to his anguish. The figure itself is skeletal, featureless, ungendered. Possibly inspired by a Peruvian mummy Munch saw at the 1889 Paris World's Fair. This facelessness is why the painting became universal. It's not just Munch's pain, it's a blank canvas you can project yourself onto. The blood-red sky has sparked endless theories. Some scientists linked it to the 1883 Krakatoa eruption, the loudest sound in recorded history, which turned European skies red for months. Others point to nacreous cloud formations common in Norwegian winters. But Munch wasn't interested in scientific accuracy. He was painting psychological collapse. Look at his technique. He painted on unprimed cardboard, cheap, rough material. First because he couldn't afford canvas. Later because he liked the texture. He used diluted paint, left areas deliberately unfinished, let the cardboard show through. An anti-art statement. He stabbed paint onto the surface with the back of his brush. He never varnished his work. Said varnish killed a painting dead. Then there was his horse cure, leaving paintings outside in his garden, exposed to all weather, to let them age naturally. He believed his paintings should have an organic life. This wasn't carelessness, it was intentional. Munch wanted his work to feel raw, damaged, alive. The Scream wasn't a standalone work. It was part of a massive project Munch called The Freize of Life, a series of 22 paintings about love, anxiety, and death. He divided them into 4 themes: the seeds of love, the passing of love, anxiety, and death. The Scream belonged to the anxiety section. Munch intended to donate the entire series to a museum in Oslo when he died, but he had a problem. People kept buying them, so whenever he sold a painting, he'd create a copy to replace it. He couldn't bear to break up the series. He called his paintings his children. Parting with them felt like abandonment. This is why multiple versions of The Scream exist. 4, to be exact. The more popular the painting, the more copies he made. In 1892, Munch was invited to exhibit in Berlin. The organizers expected traditional Norwegian fjord paintings. Instead, they got The Scream. Critics were outraged. Too raw, too brutal, too unfinished. The show was shut down after 1 week. Munch loved it. The scandal made him an overnight sensation. On August 22, 2004, 2 armed men walked into the Munch Museum in Oslo. In broad daylight, visitors watched as they ripped The Scream and another Munch painting off the wall and walked out. This was the second theft. A different version had been stolen in 1994. Both were eventually recovered. But here's where it gets interesting. When the 2004 version was returned, conservators immediately went to work. They repaired every tear, every stain, every bit of damage. Munch would have hated this. Remember the horse cure? Munch believed his paintings should age, damage, and evolve. He wanted them to have an organic life. The theft, the tears, the rough handling, that was part of the painting's life now, but conservators restored it to pristine condition, erasing the very thing Munch would have embraced. One of the great ironies of The Scream is that the world's most famous painting about anguish and chaos is now preserved behind glass. Frozen, perfect, safe. Everything Munch feared. So why did Munch write could only have been painted by a madman on his own painting? He added the inscription after the 1895 exhibition. Critics had questioned his mental stability. It hurt him deeply. A man who spent his entire life terrified of insanity, watching his family succumb to it one by one, was now being publicly accused of madness. The inscription was his response. Bitter, ironic, defiant. You think I'm mad? Fine. Only a madman could have painted this. But here's the truth. He wasn't wrong. The Scream is a self-portrait of a man on the edge of collapse. A man haunted by death, disease, and the screams of his institutionalized sister. In 1908, Munch would suffer his breakdown. He'd spend 8 months in a clinic. The Scream predicted it. Sometimes the artist's breakdown is the masterpiece. Munch painted what he feared most. And in doing so, he created something the entire world could feel. That desperate need to block out the noise, the chaos, the screaming. We've all been there, standing on that bridge, hands over our ears, trying to silence the scream. What do you think? Tell me in the comments.